From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Later on tonight, those open lines. Here's what's happening. In a dramatic assessment of the domestic threat posed by the Islamic State, the FBI Director James Comey says that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people across the country who are receiving recruitment overtures from the terrorist group or directives to attack right here in the United States. Comey says the Islamic State, also known as ISIL, is leveraging social media in unprecedented ways through Twitter and other platforms, directing messages to smartphones of what he says disturbed people who could be pushed to launch assaults on U.S. targets. Boy, that's dangerous. Well, it's a thought that is just a little too Orwellian for most people, putting a microchip inside your body, but there are people now that are doing just that already, and most of those are doing it because they say it's a matter of convenience. Now they can log into their computer, lock or unlock their front door, even start their car with the simple wave of a microchip implanted in their hand. And what if you could implant a chip in your child? Would you do that in case the child is lost or worse, kidnapped? People are thinking about that too. And experts are working on the possibility of GPS, putting it in like watches or bracelets as tracking devices so you can just simply put it somewhere. Think about that. We're going to talk with Catherine Albrecht about this pretty soon. Social Security, they say, is in the worst shape than you thought, according to a study. They say that it could be out of money by 2033. Some other people say nope, maybe even sooner than that. And rebounding from a dismal start of the year, the U.S. economy added 223,000 jobs in April, a solid gain that suggested that employers are helping fuel a durable, if still subpar, recovery. Let's check in with Michael Shedlock on this one. Mish, what do you think of those numbers?
I don't know, George. I looked at them. It was a healthy rebound. But when you dive into it, and I've been following not only the job establishment survey, that was the one where we had the good number, but also the household survey. Last month, the household survey said only 34,000 jobs. This month, it rebounded to 200,000, actually 192,000 to be more precise. But when you also look at the details, 198,000 of the 192,000 were part-time jobs. So what are we doing here, George? I don't know. I think we need to watch a couple more jobs reports to really see whether it was cold weather, as they claim, or a slowdown, as I believe you and I think.
I think so, too. Mish, thanks so much. Have yourself a great weekend. A big sunspot, it's called AR 2339, turning toward the planet, posing a threat for strong solar flares. Oh, boy, here we go. 55% of a chance of an M-class flare, but they say a 10% chance of X flares. Look, we are working on doing another show on our campaign to get the power grid insulated from an EMP attack or a solar flare. And we're starting to get some people interested in trying to get legislation passed to get this done. The out-of-control Russian spacecraft that last week failed to dock with the International Space Station has safely crashed back to Earth. NASA and Russian space agencies are reporting that it smashed into the ocean, nobody hurt. What else is going on in the skies? Well, let's look up and check in on Peter Davenport at the National UFO Reporting Center. What's our week look like, Peter?
Well, no reports of that crashing Russian satellite, fortunately. I think it went in over the Pacific Ocean, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll be out of pocket next week. I'm headed to McMinnville, Oregon, a conference you know well, and Tom may have some difficulty getting in touch with me on a Friday, but I'd recommend he start in the bar.
Oh, yeah, really. Paging Peter Davenport.
A lot of interesting reports. We just updated our website with 147 newly received reports since last Friday, George, so it's been a very active week, starting with probably the most dramatic sighting that occurred over the past week. Going out to Tennessee, the city of Saudi Daisy, which is about 10 or 15 miles north of Chattanooga, just on the west side of Chickamauga Lake, last Saturday morning, about 9:30, a gentleman was driving to the south, beautifully clear day, blue sky, no clouds visible. He was gazing up into the sky, and he saw a silver object. He couldn't tell whether it was a disc or a sphere, just streaking across the sky over the highway, almost directly above him, headed southbound. He saw it for, he estimates, 1.5 to 2 seconds only, but he got a good eyeball on it. He said it was a sphere or a disc. No empennage, no engines, no nothing on it. He said it was one of the most dramatic sightings he's ever seen. That report is on our website for the 2nd of May. The next day, Teslin, Yukon Territory, up in Canada, north of me, gentleman was driving on the Alaska Highway, driving west from the city of Teslin towards Whitehorse, and his attention was drawn to an object that was up against a hillside. He said it was generally black, but it had some beige patches on it. It moved slowly down the hill, much more slowly than an aircraft or a helicopter would have been moving, he felt, crossed the highway in front of him, dipped down the slope on the right side of the highway, the north side, and just kept going. Very, very good sighting of that by a seemingly qualified witness. Very interesting report. Yesterday morning, Thursday morning, the 7th of May, about 9:30 in the morning, New Waterford, Ohio, gentleman was driving west on Highway 46 out of New Waterford, saw an aluminum-colored triangle. Had no engines, no windows, no insignias, no nothing. It was just I said triangle, I meant rectangle, silver-colored rectangle just moving slowly across the sky. He saw it for 30 seconds or so, and then it suddenly just disappeared. And finally, a sighting from Fort Lauderdale. This is Thursday, yesterday, in the evening, an adult male saw an oval-shaped object about the size of a moon, he said, George. So an unmistakable object in the nighttime sky out east of Fort Lauderdale over the Atlantic Ocean, moving very slowly. He estimates he saw it for 15 minutes. It had stripes on its sides, like I imagine the stripes on the side of a tiger. The reason I find that report so intriguing is a similar or identical object reported from Spring Hill, Florida, about 175 miles northwest of Fort Lauderdale, just 2 hours earlier. So a lot going on and a lot of good reports on our website.
All right, and enjoy McMinnville, Peter. You'll have a great time out there. Tourists around the world are being drawn to a bizarre death simulator at a Chinese amusement park that offers you a chance to experience cremation. Boy, this is not funny at all. The ride, called the Cremator, offers the curious to find out what it feels like to be cremated using a system of hot air and light projections, and you have to get into a temporary coffin when they do this, and people are doing it. They're flocking to this amusement park just to see what it's like to get cremated. Ghost stories. How many times have we talked about if you're outside, have a little campfire and talk about ghost stories or listen to the program? Well, there's somebody out there who's been doing this for a long time. His name is Jim Harold, and he hosts the Paranormal Podcast. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Jim Harold, host of the Paranormal Podcast, lifelong interest in the paranormal, has combined this love of broadcasting and technology with some incredible podcasts. He's also a noted author. He's got several books out there. Jim Harold's Campfire, True Ghost Stories 1, 2, and 3. And here he is back on Coast to Coast. Hey, Jim, it was good meeting you a couple weeks ago. How are you?
I am doing well, and it was an absolute pleasure to meet you and Tom. That Kent event was a lot of fun.
It sure was. It sure was. So what keeps pushing you into this ghostly arena?
Well, it's that never-ending quest for answers, and I don't know if we'll ever find the answers or get any closer, but it's a lot of fun and just incredibly interesting to talk about these subjects and of course, hear people's great stories. People
love to hear ghost stories. How come?
I think that it meets our need to believe in something greater than ourselves. I think that we take these as a way to ruminate in our mind and think our mind. It's like, it's not just materialistic. It's not just what you can measure in a test tube or weigh on a scale. But there's something larger out that. And I think ghost stories are kind of like our lifeline to that. And it's something goes back, to the dawn of time, and then with great programs with yours, like your Ghost to Ghost series, and hopefully my little part with the Campfire Show.
Well, it's strange, that story I had before you came on in China. People are flocking to an amusement park to see what it's like to get cremated. I mean, what's happening to people, Jim?
Well, I think, but it's funny because I think part of the appeal of ghost stories is similar to that. I think people go to amusement park to be on a roller coaster or a scary ride, like the Tower of Terror at Disney or whatever, because they feel they can be scared, but yet they're safe. And I think that's part of the appeal of a ghost story because in terms of entertainment, and I don't think that's all that's to this, but the entertainment part of it, people can kind of bring themselves to the edge. They can be terrified, but yet they know they're safe because we're just telling stories.
When did you start podcasting?
Actually, this July will be my 10th anniversary. I started with the Paranormal Podcast. I'm not the brightest bulb out there, but I thought, well, I'm going to start a podcast on the paranormal. What should I call it? Paranormal Podcast. Well, somebody's got to have that name. Nobody had that name. So started that and continue that to this day, and then started the Campfire in 2009.
And people are really into this. Do they participate? Do they call you?
Yeah. We have a call-in show with the Campfire, and usually we probably tell about a half a dozen stories a show every week, and it's amazing. You get people from all over the world. I just talked to somebody who called in from Skype from Japan a couple of weeks ago. So it's a lot of fun. And the thing is that when I first started this, I thought this will be entertaining. This will be fun to tell ghost stories. But I think and you know this better than anybody, having heard all the stories you have over the years, I think there's a much deeper level to it. And over time I saw that people took it much more seriously. Yeah, it's fun to tell spooky stories, but the experiencers that would tell you these stories, it would just, you could tell that they were agonizing sometimes over things that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. They had chills. You could hear a quiver in their voice. So over time, I've come to really realize that it is entertaining, yes, but it means a lot more than that to people. Not just my show, but just these shows in general, and particularly a great show like this one.
I had a scientist on last night, Jim, who is the co-author with Stephen Hawking, and he's a great physicist. But he doesn't believe in life after death. He doesn't believe we've been visited by extraterrestrials, though he believes it's possible that there is life, intelligent life out there in this universe and maybe the multiverse. But how do you convince someone, like a physicist, who simply says, when you die, that's it?
I don't think that we necessarily can convince them. I think that a lot of times what it takes is some kind of personal experience. And I think most people have those experiences. One of the interesting things when I tell people, when I'm just going around my daily business, and when I used to do this on the side, it's my full-time gig now, but when I used to do this on the side, I would tell people I work with what I did, and they kind of would look at me funny, and they'd say, well, I don't believe in any of that stuff. But there was this one time. And the thing is, I think with people like the person you explained or described, I think it's very difficult to convert them, and maybe we shouldn't necessarily, that might not necessarily be our job, but keep trying to put the ideas out there, having a conversation with these people, as you did last night, trying to build bridges so we can find some common ground at least. But I don't think we should necessarily be in the business of by we believers, people who believe in these things, should necessarily be in the business of converting people, but certainly building bridges, having discussions, hearing them out. I mean, on my shows, and I know you do the same thing, I like to have skeptics on because I think it's important that we listen to them sometimes too and keep ourselves grounded.
Have you always been a believer in life after death?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
No doubt, no doubts.
Well, no, I would never say no doubts. But I say that I certainly believe in it. I mean, what got me started? Leonard Nimoy and In Search Of. I'm in my mid-40s, and I was a little kid.
He got a lot of people going.
I talk to people all the time, so God bless his soul. I've been fascinated with it, and when I decided to start podcasting 10 years ago, I thought, well, what are we going to podcast on? And I kept thinking about when I go in a bookstore, or I turn on the radio, or I go into a library, what do I gravitate to? And it was always the paranormal and these Fortean topics, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids. And I said, well, I'll do this thing for 6 months, and I'll talk to great people like Brad Steiger and all these people, and I'll have it all figured out. Well, I haven't been doing it anywhere near as long as you have. 10 years, I have more questions now than I had when I started, but the one thing I'm certain of, something is going on.
I'm beginning to tip toward something very natural, that it's part of this existence, that there's nothing really supernatural about it, but it's just a very normal offshoot of what we are all experiencing in this universe.
I think that's a good point. The example that I use is that DNA, it's been around, since the beginning. But in 1900, scientists didn't know it existed, and probably would have scoffed at the idea as they did many things. But that didn't mean that it was supernatural or something unusual. It was just a part of our natural world we didn't understand at that particular time because we didn't have the techniques, the instruments, and the knowledge. And I do hope that over time, whatever all of this is, that we gain the techniques, the knowledge, and the instruments to measure it. I just hope that our scientists have the willingness to record it once we start getting that technology and that knowledge to do so. And it's not just rejected out of hand because it's against the worldview that many of them are kind of locked into.
Oh, absolutely. And Jim, I'm going to get into a lot of these stories with you after the break. But when you look at life after death, and you see so many people trying to communicate, and some of them can and some of them cannot. What creates that block for people who just can't communicate with their loved ones who've passed over?
Well, first of all, strangely enough, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just a guy who asks questions. but my opinion are a couple of different things. I had a guest the other day was talking about sometimes maybe there's a subconscious block. It's an unconscious block. For example, I've had some people very close to me die within the last couple of years, and I've had no communication. I don't consider myself particularly psychic or sensitive, although I do believe. So I think sometimes maybe it's just our own, our own roadblocks. I'm starting to think more and more. Again, do I have the answers? No, I ask the questions. But that's one of my thoughts. And who knows, on that other side, how difficult is it for our loved ones and those who have passed to communicate with us? It may take years. I mean, there's some great stories out there where people communicated 5, 10, 15 years later. So maybe this is something that's not as turnkey or as on-off as we might hope.
How do you know that some of the stories that you've accumulated, for example, with your True Ghost Stories books, are real, or that folks, are, maybe making them up?
Well,
I have to go through that too.
Yeah, that's always a concern. What I go by, and I think that I know you've spoken to many more people than I have, but I think that you get a sense if somebody is being sincere. Doesn't mean what they're saying is necessarily paranormal, but they believe the events that they recount as they recount them. So they're telling you what they saw, what they felt, what happened, as they recall it, and they're sincere. And the vast majority of people I talk to who take the time to be on the show, I think, are being sincere, and they truly believe that they've experienced something paranormal. Now, there's times when people will say things, I'm like, well, I believe you believe what you're saying, but I don't necessarily believe that's paranormal. However, when I put together these books, because there's 3 books, each one has 70 stories, I really tried to focus on the ones that had the main criteria was sincerity. Did this person believe that this really happened? And in each case, I go back and I listen to the stories and recall, and some of them are just, you don't forget the stories. And so I would say the vast majority of people that I talk to, I believe, are sincere and are not making these things up, but these are things that truly happened.
All right, we're going to talk about what's in these true ghost story books next. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. As I was mentioning, Jim Harold has also written several books, including True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire, 1, 2, and 3. 3 books out there. Each one could be turned into a little movie, a mini-movie.
I like the way you think. No, that would be a lot of fun. I mean, there really are some really remarkable stories that people are willing to share, and I really am most appreciative that they're willing to do that, because a lot of times it's something that's very near and dear to them. And many people have told me, I've not told anybody about this for years. So it's really gratifying. They feel comfortable to share their stories. How
did you accumulate the stories? Did they come to you via podcast first, and you put it into the book form?
Well, basically what I do for the show, my audience, I say, hey, if you want to be a part of the show, you come to the website, you fill out a little form, and then I have certain slots, and I call them and put it all together as a podcast, a series of stories, like I said, maybe half a dozen stories a podcast. And then what I've done, I think I'm about up to something like on that program about 230 episodes. And I go through them and I listen for the best stories, in my opinion, the most sincere, the most interesting, and I just, basically do an edit on them and clean them up for the books. And people have seemed to be enjoying them and planning on another book in the fall.
Okay, well, this is what we're going to do, folks. If you're at home, dim your lights and get comfortable. If you're on your couch or something, go get a little candle, light it. If you're in bed, pull the covers up close to your chin. And if you're driving around, well, just be attentive, because we're going to talk about some stories with Jim Harold here, true ghost stories. And we've taken some notes on several stories here, Mr. Harold, so let me throw the title out to you, and then you tell us about the story, okay?
Okay.
How about the girl in the attic?
Yeah, this is one, it's a kind of a shorter story, but a boy, actually his name is, or a man, when he told me the story, Lindsay from North Carolina, talks about a time when he was about 9 or 10 years old, and he went to visit some friends who lived a couple of hours away. Now, he knew some of the people, but this was a family that he did not know. It was like his best friend's extended family. And they were playing around, and they went up into the attic. It was very clean and sparse, he says. He said there wasn't a lot to do up there, but kids, particularly back in the day, they would find things to do. You give them a stick and a ball, they got something to do. So they went up there, and he noticed that there was this little girl in the attic. And he said that this girl was kind of standoffish. She wanted to stay in one corner, like it was her space, like she was protecting it. She didn't want to come down and play with them much. And he said he remembered at one point they had a ball and they were tossing it around, and they'd toss it to her, and she wouldn't even respond, wouldn't even act like it bothered her or she wanted anything to do with it. She didn't talk. She said had very long hair, and she was wearing a white sundress or gown, but her clothes seemed modern. Now, they decided after not being able to play with ball with her, they were going to play some cards or checkers or something like that. So they had her join around the table, and she was just sitting there. And they'd make their moves, and she would just sit there not doing anything. She didn't want to talk. And he said specifically her hair was over her face, so he never saw her face. It was almost like a ghost girl out of a movie. And at the time, he was a kid and thought, well, she's no fun. She doesn't want to play with us. So the other thing that was very weird, not only how she was acting, but he said that her movements were not fluid. It's not like she actually...
Almost robotic?
Well, almost like photographs, like a flip book of photographs, all kind of herky-jerky, almost like little snapshots. And I've heard that before,
like
which is interesting.
Like a little staccato movement.
Yeah, which I've heard before, which is kind of odd. You hear little things that go along, consistent in different stories. So they called for dinner, and she didn't come. She basically disappeared, and it was like nobody knew who this girl was. She obviously wasn't a part of the family because everybody came and ate. And then after a while, he said it dawned on him that they had been playing with a ghost. He said that's the only conclusion that he could come up with, really. And so he believes that, he tried to play checkers with the ghost. But a very strange encounter, and the thing that I found particularly strange was this herky-jerky movement. And I've heard that in other stories.
And at no time did they feel threatened or were they scared? Nothing like that.
More that she was just annoying them because she didn't interact. And you would think maybe somebody that had some kind of medical problem or something, but he said no.
All right, what's this one? Bull Moose is back.
Oh, this is interesting. I actually did a little bit of research on this and found out that Bull Moose is actually, I believe his name was Bull Moose Jackson, a real person who actually, I believe, from some research I've done, had the first million-selling R&B record, I think back in the 40s.
Really?
Yeah, and my caller, Sandy, and if Sandy's out there, she's one of our most loyal callers. Sandy, hi. She tells this story. She worked at a small record company in Pittsburgh back in the 1980s. She was a graphic designer. And she had this dream. And in a dream, she was in a local record store. Remember those? And basically...
I still have a few of these.
I do, too. And basically, all of a sudden, this elderly man comes up to her and starts saying, "When is it going to be done?" And he's like, she's like, "What?" And he said, "The record. When is the record going to be done?" And he said, "I'm very sorry. I'm sorry to tell you, but I don't know what you're talking about. The record, they've got to finish the record." So it clicked with her because she said that she has a history of lucid dreaming, that this was something that she needed to remember and interact with. So she asks this man, she says, "Well, give me some songs that are on this record that's not completed yet, that she's upset with." So basically, the gist of it was she had this dream, this person, elderly man, was upset that his record wasn't completed, and he gave her some songs.
Was this Bull Moose Jackson?
Yes, Bull Moose Jackson, yes. And in the dream, yes. So anyway...
He died in 89.
Yeah, so it makes sense. It makes sense because if she worked in the 80s and the early 90s, it makes sense. So anyway, she, a couple weeks later, she asks one of the guys that works at the place, and she kind of says, "You have some different pictures on the wall in the office. Now, there's a little guy with big glasses and kind of a long face. Is his name Bull something? I couldn't remember his name, and is he dead?" And the guy at the record company, one of her coworkers, I think he was higher up, looked at her and said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" So she told him the dream, and he said, "Well, somebody's told you about this." And she said, No, nobody's told me about that." And he said, "Okay, well, tell me some of the songs." And she told him some of the songs, and he turned white as a sheet. So anyway, that night, I guess this guy goes over to the owner of the record store, at his house, and they're talking about this, and they're all like, "Oh, she's making this up, and somebody fed her this information because we were working on a record with him." And the owner actually laughs and scoffs. At the minute he does that, the dishes fell off the cupboard and crashed to the floor.
How about that, huh?
Both these guys
Timing.
looked at each other who were involved in the production of this record, said, "We better finish this." So anyway, Sandy, this whole time, while this is going on, feels like almost Bull Moose is a part of her. And anyway, a few months later, she goes to a release party for another local band. And she hadn't talked to anybody about the Bull Moose album, didn't even know what had been done. She said she was going to let the universe do her thing. She said she was outside listening to the band, and all of a sudden she started crying and feeling a spirit lifting out of her body, like right out of her solar plexus. She said it felt like separation. It felt like this entity or spirit was full of joyousness, happiness, and gratitude. Said it made her totally giddy, and she was crying, and she didn't know why, but she knew it was Bull Moose. So anyway, she's at this release party. She walks up to one of these men who were in charge of the production of this record, and she was very overwhelmed, and she said, "Did you finish the album?" And he turned to her and said, "We just put the album to bed." And she said, Volmus says thank you. So it's just kind of a wild story, and somebody who had a piece of their life's work that wanted completed, and he worked through her to make it happen.
That's a great story. Now, we get lots of calls from people who have gotten phone calls from their dead grandmothers, their grandfathers. You've got one called a call from Grandpa.
Yeah, and this is a shorter story, but no less powerful. This is a story of Velma from Texas. And her father had died when she was very young, in the early 70s, about 4.5 years old, unfortunately. And at that time, she was very close to her father's side of the family as a child. But as she grew up, they kind of lost touch and so forth. And during the early part of 1990, her grandfather passed away, and unfortunately she didn't go to the funeral. And in August of that year, a couple of days before her birthday, she was home in her apartment. She was getting ready to go to work, and the phone rang, and she picked up the phone and said, hello. And she said she could hear a very muffled sound, and she had to say hello several times. She could tell someone was there, but this person was very muffled. The third time she said hello, she heard the voice call her by name. But here's the thing. This was a nickname that only her father's side of the family called her. And she knew right away that it was her grandfather by the tone of his voice and what he called her. He called her Velmita. And she said she really got spooked. She hung up the phone because she didn't understand what was going on. She didn't expect it. And then she hung up. She picked up the phone again, thinking it was going to be a dial tone, and he was still on the line.
Still there.
Yeah, and it made her very, very afraid, not afraid, but spooked, I guess is the
Uncomfortable?
word. Uncomfortable, but she said she's absolutely sure it was him, particularly because it was right around her birthday. Now, she wonders if maybe she should have done something differently, but I don't know. That's a very difficult, could you imagine, George, picking up the phone and having a loved one on the other end? How do you react in that instant? It's got to be a very challenging thing.
Shock.
The use of the name, the tone of his voice, totally convinced her that was her grandfather. And I've heard other similar stories, so who's to say that it's not possible?
Now, with caller ID, a lot of people report seeing very strange phone numbers when they come through.
Yes, I've heard that. And the thing is that this is 1990. I'm not sure if caller ID was in by then, but it does add another aspect to it. And then I think, of course, about that great, and you've had him on the show before, Billy Mooney.
Oh yeah,
that call from Grandma from the Twilight Zone, and what a great episode that was. But maybe those things happen in real life. And we even had a person who reported, I think I may have mentioned on one of the other shows, somebody who actually had their grandmother, their late grandmother, leave a message, call him a very specific nickname that only she used. Then and this is in the days of tape, when they went back to listen to it, the message was gone.
What is it about these spirits that creates this desire to want to communicate with us?
This is just my speculation. I think that if we believe our loved ones survive, and we have a good relationship with them, or even if we have maybe not so good of a relationship, maybe they want to come back to mend some fences, and if we do have a great relationship and they love us very much and we love them, why wouldn't they want to communicate with us in some way just to say, I'm still here? I mean, I haven't seen any full-body apparitions or anything, but my brother passed in 1999, and he was autistic. And he was a big fan of all things of Lawrence Welk, if people out there remember him. He loved Lawrence Welk.
He may have been the only one who was a fan of Lawrence.
Anybody under the age of 60.
I'm gonna get emails from Lawrence Welk fans now. I'm only kidding. Only kidding.
Well, he was a big deal at one time. But anyway,
champagne bubbles and things like that.
Yeah, but anyway. So I was coming back home from my brother's funeral. He died very young, 28 years old, unexpected. And I was flipping through, and I've always loved, like, Sinatra and Dean Martin and Nat King Cole and that stuff. I was in southern Ohio, and I was going through the stations. They had one of these stations on. So I listened a little while, and then I heard this instrumental. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. Who could that be? I know that song, but I don't know who. And the DJ came on the back announce, and he said, of course, that was Lawrence Welk with his big hit from 1960 at Calcutta. And I thought, that was my brother getting in touch with me.
That's right.
In his way.
In their own little way. And you just have to interpret it, don't you?
Yeah, and I think that for me it was, and again, some people might say I was just, hearing what I wanted to hear, but my thought was, and my wife heard it too, she was there with me, my thought was, what were the chances I'd be driving through that little town at that little time with that little radio station, and when was the last time you heard Lawrence Welk on the radio? So I think that was my brother saying, hey, big brother, don't worry about me, I'm okay.
You got that right. Another story called Man of Science. What's that one?
Yeah, this is interesting. This is one that comes actually from Australia. And this guy was literally a scientist at a hospital, but I guess they had to, I think it was a pathologist or something. So he would have to work a shift, and then they would go sleep, but they would be on call, and he would actually stay to a property adjacent to the hospital that was connected with a tunnel. There was only one way out and in. So he knocked off for the evening, went through security. He had his little pager. This was the time when you still had pagers, not cell phones. And went past the security desk and said, hey, I'm going to go to bed here, and they'll page me if something comes up. He checked in. He went into his room. All of a sudden, maybe an hour later, can't go to sleep, he hears somebody knock. And his first name was Mark. But somebody knocked 2 doors down and called him by his last name, Mr. and his last name, which was very unusual, paging him saying that there was an emergency, he needed to come. Well, first of all, it was very unusual because he wasn't knocking on his door, he was knocking a couple doors down, where one of his friends was studying for some kind of test or something, one of his coworkers. So anyway, he calls the main desk at the ER, which is actually over there in Australia, I guess it's called Casualty, and said, did you guys page me? And they said, no, we didn't page you. And then he checked with the security desk and said, well, there's one way out and one way in. Did anybody go by and knock on doors over here? Because somebody was calling for me just a few minutes ago saying there was an emergency. No, nobody called for you. Nobody came past. And you have to go through this tunnel because it was a certain time of night. Everything else was locked down. So one way out, one way in. So anyway, next morning he talks to his friend who's 2 doors over. He's like, yeah, I heard the whole thing. He said, I didn't know what was going on. I was going to come over and check on you, but I heard you call a couple places, heard the knock, and I figured, well, it's all handled, and I just continued studying on my test. So a few days later, he was working in biochemistry, and one of the nurses, the ward taking blood, and one of the nurses came up to him and said, Mark, we heard about what happened to you. And he said, well, news travels quickly. And she said, look, you're not the only one this has happened to. She said, over the years, we've had medical staff who have been called out when they're on call or something in the middle of the night, having someone knocking on their door and calling their name out to come to an emergency that doesn't exist. Jeez. She said, you've got to realize this hospital is haunted.
That doesn't exist. You would think that maybe these spirits would get you into an emergency before the machinery, let's say, went on. And get somebody there fast.
Yeah, maybe. But in this case, it was like a prank. This was like a prankster.
A prankster,
because,
yeah.
It would call people out, not just Mark, but other people, to emergencies that didn't exist. And the thing that's interesting to me is that, and I also have a story, and I don't have it here tonight because I don't believe it's in the book. It's a newer story. A woman who cleaned medical offices, was a cleaning woman at a hospital, and she kept seeing this man in a suit appearing out of nowhere, and it turns out it was a cancer ward. He died of cancer.
Oh, those wards, Jim, must be loaded with people. We're going to be back with more with Jim Harold, True Ghost Stories 1, 2, and 3. We're going to continue chatting with Jim Harold, and we'll get to your calls as we talk about true ghost stories right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Jim Harold. Jim, for folks who want to listen to your podcast, how do they do that?
Well, the easy way is to go over to jimharold.com. You can play them right from the website. And then, of course, iTunes is a big place for podcasts and all this. Luckily, we're usually pretty high in the charts in our categories. You just search for Jim Harold in iTunes or your Apple Podcasts app or your Android apps. You can listen there. And you can also check out my free app, Jim Harold Central, on Apple and Android, and you can listen in those and many other ways.
When people are telling these ghost stories, have you noticed that any of them seem frightened, almost scared to death?
Yes. And what's remarkable to me, and I talked about this a little earlier, is the fact, particularly when you've got somebody on the line who's 40, 50 years old and they're talking about something that happened to them when they were 10.
Yeah, they have never forgotten it.
Yeah, and that it etched a place in their mind. And, it takes a pretty good actor or actress to fake that. And you get that, and a lot of times they'll have almost exactly this quote, I'm getting goosebumps just now retelling this story. So in those cases, I think I can ferret out, people telling the truth, and I think that's a vast majority of people I talk to.
Next story I'd like you to talk about is called The Case of the Bookcase.
Yeah, one of these things that are interesting, I've always been fascinated by premonitions. And this goes to one of our listeners in Canada, Judith. And this is a few years back. She'd been married for a couple of years, and her husband and her had traveled to Hungary to visit some family. They arrived very late at night at the airport, and they were very, very tired. Her cousin picked them up and drove them to this apartment that they were going to be staying at, because at least I don't know how it is now, but this time, people would stay in private residences and things. So they went there. The cousin, the owner of the place, showed him the room and so forth. It was a large, old-fashioned apartment, a great big room, and he said, well, good night and good luck and enjoy your stay. And all of a sudden, Judith said, no. We're going to have to make some changes here. And they kind of looked at her kind of funny. It's 2:30 in the morning. What are you talking about? And there were two beds. And one was, I believe one was in one corner and one was in the other corner. And she said, no, those beds are going to have to be moved over there. And she said that she was so determined, and she didn't know why. Something came over her. She said it was like her feet were nailed to the ground. Mm-hmm. She says, you're going to have to move this. You've got to remember, this is probably, I think she said it was right around 1980. This is older, heavy European furniture. It's 2:30 to 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's tired. Nobody feels like moving it, but she insisted. So they moved it, probably thinking she was, not quite there. So anyway, they don't think any more of it. They go to bed, her and her husband, and a couple of hours later, there is this huge crash and glass shattering, just the earth-shaking crash. And they wake up. It's very dark, so they can't see anything. And they think that literally a car has crashed into the
right through their house, yeah.
Husband got up, walking gingerly to avoid the glass, turned on the light switch, and there was this huge bookcase that had beveled glass, all kinds of things in it, heavy encyclopedias that had totally crashed where the one bed was. So they were quite startled, because if they had not moved that bed, whoever would have been lying, probably a husband in that bed, would have almost certainly been killed. So the next morning, they tell the gentleman who owns the place, and he was just flabbergasted. He said, this was my grandfather's bookcase. I've been here since I've been a little kid. I've slept in that bed many times myself. That has been there for decades. And I would have never thought that would have come down that wall. But yet, Judith knew that bed, she didn't know why, but she knew it had to be moved. And she said after that, she says, any time she gets a hunch about something, she doesn't judge it, she doesn't second guess it. She goes with her gut, because her gut saved somebody's life that night.
That's probably pretty smart. The big question here, Jim, is how in the heck does this happen? How does it work?
I don't know.
I mean, nobody has these answers.
I know, that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes it's frustrating a little bit. You know, you wish you could do this for a number of years and you kind of get it. But maybe it's a higher power, maybe warning us. Maybe it's I know your friend Rosemary Ellen Guiley has done a lot of work on angels. Maybe it's angels. Who knows what it is? But I think it's something. Maybe it's we talked about past loved ones. Maybe it's past loved ones looking out for us. I don't know, but I know it happens. I know similar things have happened to me, where if you would have zigged instead of zagged, you might not be here. So who knows?
Staying for the credits. What's that ghost story?
Well, yeah, it was not quite a ghost story, but it's another, because these are mainly ghost stories, but there's some more unusual ones. And this is an interesting one. This is a time slip story.
A time slip? Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, where you have missing time.
Okay.
You know, you're going along your business, and it's 3 o'clock, and all of a sudden it's 7 o'clock, and you don't know what happened to that time.
Yeah. It happens a lot when people drive, too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this was a little different because this was at the movies. Our caller, Marco, was dealing with some significant health problems back in 2004, and he had cancer. Now, luckily, good news, I spoke with him a few months ago or emailed him, and he's doing well, when somebody had a comment about this story. And but he went to see a movie called Hellboy that came out in 2004.
I didn't like that movie. It was scary.
Well, I don't think Marco cared for it too much after this because it freaked him out. This was 2:45 show. It was one of these cineplexes with multiple screens and so forth, but it was only playing on one screen. So anyway, he walked in with his wife. They got their concessions. They walked in the theater about 2:35 for a 2:45 start, but they went in and the previews were playing. At least they thought they were the previews. And they continued to watch these images, and they thought all of a sudden, these aren't the previews. This is the movie. In fact, this is the end of the movie. So they watch it for about 3 or 4 minutes, and the movie ends. The lights come up, and they walk next. They talk to the guy next to him and say, "Was this the 2:45 showing?" Yes, this was a 2:45 showing. He looks down at his watch, it's 4:47. Movie's playing in no other screen in the Cineplex. They walk out, they talk to the person taking the tickets, the guy taking the tickets.
Yeah.
You remember us? Yeah, we remember us. There's a 2:45 showing, yeah. Yeah, you walked in about 2 hours ago.
Jeez.
And then he went further out into the lobby where you could see the sun. The sun had gone, it was the spring, so the sun was down quite a bit from where it was.
Clearly the time had gone by.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's interesting because this was a story that I was told probably back in 2009 when we first started the show. I literally had somebody last year, a listener, because people listen to podcasts years later, saying, well, you know, I investigated, that was the weekend. The weekend that he's describing was daylight savings time and blah, blah, blah. And my caller said, no, he said, I actually know the date. It was the day before. And he says, I'm a freak about watches. And I know this happened. So I don't know what happened, but time slips, missing time, certainly an interesting topic.
What about the story called Rats?
This is one of the freakier ones. This woman had a stepmom, and this is actually Jackie from Nevada. I almost used to say Nevada, but it's actually Nevada. But anyway, her stepmom, all these weird things would happen. They had a house that caught on fire. One night at dinner, her stepmother kind of grabbed her and said, "Who slapped me?" And no one had slapped her. And this Jackie thought that her stepmom was just imagining things, and then she showed her arm, and they actually had a handprint there that came out from another way. They had this big sculpture thing on their console television that at one point actually, it's called a cypress knee. I guess it's a southern thing. There's sculptures made out of a tree. And this thing, which weighed multiple pounds, actually levitated off the television, according to Jackie, moved across the room and dropped in front of her mother-in-law. But that's the tame stuff. This is the one that got me, George. Apparently, they would be sitting around watching television, and rats would drop from the ceiling onto the stepmother. Yeah. Nobody else, according to Jackie. They would literally go throughout the house, she said sometimes they were rats and sometimes they were mice. I don't really think there's a good choice there. But but they would set rat traps and mice traps. They would catch nothing. They would look all over for an infestation, nothing. But they would seemingly come out of nowhere and drop upon this woman while she would be watching television. And she said that her stepmom may have been, and I'm not being judgmental or anything, but her theory is that her stepmom was into the Ouija board, she was into witchcraft, and maybe she attracted these kind of things. And there were other things that happened. But to me, the story could stop and end with rats falling onto the ceiling to me. I would just have a total phobia about that.
That would be horrible.
Yeah. Could you imagine? You're just sitting there watching the game and rats fall from the sky.
I'm out of there. The reclining ghost.
Yeah, this is a wild one. You know, the idea that inanimate objects can somehow maintain something or carry something with them is always fascinating. And this is a story of some used furniture. A family friend our caller was Jeannie from Washington, and she told the story of where she went with her mom to this house to get a couple of recliners that a friend had offered her. They were getting rid of them. And there was an older man there, and he told Jeannie's mom, "You can take these, but only you can have them, nobody else." So the mom of the family said, "Sure, I'll take them and I'll keep them." And at the time, she wasn't really thinking of giving them to anybody. So a couple of months after they got the furniture, this older man passed away, they found out. Now, after his death, weird things happened around the house. Specifically with this one recliner, things would move. So much so they would make jokes about saying, you know, "Ghost, if you drop anything, you're picking it up because I'm not going to clean up after you. You made the mess, so you pick it up." Her brother got sick, got very depressed. He had a chair in his room. At one point, they ended up getting rid of one of the chairs and gave it to the elder sister of the family, and she put it in her son's room. And her son started experiencing weird things. He would say that sometimes at night he would see the chair move. He would see a hand come across the resting arm area, and it would tap away, tapping its fingers. He told his mom, "There's this arm. I'm seeing this thing. I don't like it. What is it?" And she didn't believe him. She said, "You're tired. You're stressed. You're just imagining it." So it happened again, and this time he went to his mom, and he refused to go back into his room. To reassure him, she said she would take the chair and put it in her room to show that there was nothing to it. Guess what? She started to hear something one night, a couple nights later. She looked up and she saw the chair moving, and all of a sudden she started to see an apparition of an arm come up, just as the boy had said, and it was starting to tap its devilish fingers and started to become a weird demonic form. Now, this is the real capper to the story. It freaked her out so much that she grabbed the chair, put it onto the curb in the middle of the night to get rid of it permanently. Now, this is Jeannie's story. She said when she came back in the house, this woman, she heard something rocking back and forth, plus a dragging sound. She couldn't figure out what the sound was. They thought maybe somebody came to pick it up, you know, you leave stuff out on the lawn, maybe somebody picks it up, thinks they could use it. So they looked out the window. Yeah. They looked out the window and got a real shock. Nobody was there picking it up. The chair by itself was rocking and dragging itself along the curb. She said, "I could have sworn I'm not lighting, but what I saw looked like a figure, and there were these weird spirits just jumping out of the chair." Jeez. She said she closed the windows and everything. She didn't even want to look. She didn't want to know. She didn't care. And that was the end of the story. But could you imagine getting a chair with spirits in it? You put it on the lawn, you look out the window, and it's literally pulling itself down the curb while these spirits are popping out of it.
And it wasn't unusually windy, I bet, either.
No, well, it'd have to be pretty windy to move
a chair like that. A tornado type.
Exactly. The spiritual tornado, I guess.
And the stories just keep on coming, Jim, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And that's the thing. There's always I worry about that sometimes. I'm like, well, are people going to run out of stories? And I don't think they will. I mean, certainly your program for years has had tons of ghost stories, and even my little program, they just keep coming because I think this is a part of almost everybody's life. It may not be as dramatic as a chair dragging itself across a curb. It may be something more subtle. But I think at one level or another, everybody experiences something.
Most of your stories are not dreadfully horrible or scary. They seem very mischievous and strange.
Yeah, because I think, when we get an idea of ghost stories, I think that we put the template of entertainment on it, and obviously entertainment's going to go for the scariest thing. And certainly there are some stories that fall into that, but it's not necessarily the majority. And I guess the way I would look at it is like this, and I heard somebody else put it this way, so I know it's not an original thought. You think about 95% of people in the world. They're just trying to do their best to get by and do what they do. And then 5% cause a lot of problem. Well, maybe it's the same way with the spirits, too. 95% of them are out there looking out for us. They just want to get a message across, and then maybe you've got that little percentage that want to scare the heck out of you. Maybe that's what's going on.
We're almost out of time, though. We're going to take some calls, but there's a few more stories I want you to relate to us, Jim, when we come back. When you started doing this, mm-hmm. were you particularly tuned in at that time?
I don't think I'm as tuned in as some people. I mean, in terms of spiritually or in terms of being sensitive.
Are you a facilitator?
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. I think, mm-hmm. not like a medium, but I think that one thing that I do think is people feel comfortable to share their stories with me. And I think in that way, yeah, I'm a facilitator. And I like that role. I don't have to be, to me, it's like a baseball or a sports commentator. There are a lot of great sports commentators who were players, but then there are a lot of great sports commentators who have never played. Never played, and I think that my idea is that if all I do is help on this show, help people get their stories across, or my other programs do interesting interviews and bring out some information people didn't know. If that, at the end of the day, if that's what I end up doing, I'm happy with that.
Well, good for you. Websites are all linked up at coasttocoastam.com. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about campfire spirits, angel on a park bench. There's something about a stalking ghost. Boy, that's kind of weird, but we'll do that. Then we'll take phone calls, and those of you on hold, if I don't get to you in the next half hour, we might hold Jim over for a little bit and take the rest of your calls. And again, his books, True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire, and then it's books number 1, 2, 3. And Jim Harold with us as we talk about his true ghost stories, and there's more to come on Coast to Coast AM. Have you had a chance yet to watch our television show Beyond Belief? Talk about strange and unusual. Well, you get it there. They've got a great promotion going on for the next 30 days, so go to this website, beyondbelief.com, and sign up to watch the show, beyondbelief.com. Okay, welcome back with Jim Harold. And Jim, I want to get some more of your stories here. And so many people are calling to talk with you, or they have stories. If we have to, can you hang another hour with us?
I would be honored.
All right, great. Just so everybody knows that. We're not going to leave you out in the cold there. The story about the campfire spirits. Tell me about that one.
One of the things that's always interested me is this idea of residual energy, a place almost kind of replaying what maybe happened in the past, and that's maybe what was going on here. This, again, a lot of Canadian stories tonight. This is one of our listeners, Craig from Canada, mm-hmm. and he talked about a plan that he had with his wife to go on a 2-night hiking trip, and they were going to a place called Elmer Pass. I guess it's in Banff, Alberta, and it was a several-hour hike, and they were going to stay for a couple nights and leave, just him and his wife. So they got there about 4 or 5 p.m. They had hiked for several hours. They set up camp. They were in a tent, and very desolate, not really a lot of people there. So they were pretty much by themselves. They had dinner that first night, and Craig says that the atmosphere felt heavy, He said it was actually quite subversive, is the word he used. They had dinner and they went to bed. Neither of them were feeling in the mood for a campfire or anything like that. So the next morning they got up and decided that they weren't going to go any further. They were just going to go back home. We're going to hike back. They weren't going to stay the certain night. And they had breakfast. And while they were eating breakfast, Craig's wife looked over him and she said, "Did you hear children last night?" And he looked at her and said, "Yes." And then their stories came out and they matched perfectly. It turns out that both of them woke up at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but neither one of them knew the other one was awake. And they both heard this. They heard sounds of campfires in the background, like cooking fires, with things sizzling on them. They heard women laughing and talking in the background. They heard children running around their tent. Now, they didn't see through the tent anything in terms of shadows, but they could hear the running just like they were outside the tent. They were laughing and giggling. He described it as very Blair Witchy.
That is weird.
But the thing is that his wife and he told each other the same stories completely independently. They said that they were pretty close to the beach of the lake that they were by, and there were a lot of pebbles, so you could hear the water, the waves rush up on the shore and go away. And it was a very rhythmic, pebbly sound, and he said in between each wave you could actually hear footsteps, heavy footsteps on the pebbles. So anyway, they both fell asleep after all of this strangeness at about 4 a.m. They got up, but they had dreams, and they were similar dreams of massive fires everywhere in the forest, the same dream. When they were sharing these stories with each other at breakfast, they were almost completing each other's sentences. So they said, "Let's get out of here." So they went to hike, and they started talking about this. They realized that Native North Americans in this area would go hunting, and they would set up areas around this area. And I should say that when they looked around their campsite before they left, nothing had been disturbed. So they heard all these things, kids running, women talking, laughing, fires burning, nothing disturbed. But anyway, when they were talking on the way back home hiking, they would say the men would go off and hunt, the women would fish and gather, and it seemed like this was almost history replaying itself. And the funny thing was that coming into this place, there was this large stream about 500 meters from the campsite, a very large stream, and they had filled their water bottles coming in with it. Going out, they were planning on doing something else. Guess what? The stream, within 24 hours, was completely, absolutely bone dry. They said, now, it could have happened overnight when whatever runoff had changed course or whatever, but it was very large before, and then it was gone. And Craig said, sounded like he was tempted to go back and see what was going on, but his wife says, no, I'm not setting foot back at that campsite again.
They won't do it. Strange. Yet again, nobody hurt, right?
Right, nobody hurt. But in this case, I think they felt, at least in terms of feeling, they felt like it was a little more oppressive, almost like, I think he said, they didn't belong there. They weren't really wanted.
Angel on a park bench.
Yeah, this is a sweet little story. I love this story. This is about Elise from Texas, and at the time the story happened, she was about 4 years old, and she had gone to the park with her stepmom. And as sometimes kids do, and everybody who's a parent like me has had this happen at least once in your life, you get separated. Very scary feeling in both directions. So anyway, she was kind of cutting up and carrying on, and she got separated. And she was in this park by herself. And she's very confused at 4 years old, not sure what to do. So she's standing there, and she sits down. There's a curb, and she starts to cry because she can't remember how to get back to her house. All of a sudden, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She said, I looked up, and I saw an elderly woman standing in front of me. She said, I can't tell you what she looked like because I don't remember, but I do remember her eyes and how calm I felt when I was around her. She just had the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen, said Elise. She asked Elise what was wrong, and she told her. She said, I lost my stepmom and my sister. And the woman said, do you mind if I sit with you until they come back because I'm sure they're still out looking for you? And Elise said, yes, you can sit with me. And she said this woman made her feel like everything was going to be okay. She was very calming, and every time a woman would walk by, the woman would ask, "Is that your stepmom?" And she'd say no. Finally, Elise saw her stepmom and her sister. The woman pointed and asked, "Is that them?" And Elise was very excited. She just bolted out and ran over to her stepmom and her sister, and her stepmom hugged her and said, "Never do that again." She took her hand, and they were going to start to walk away, and she said, "Wait, I want to say goodbye to the old lady." And her stepmom said, "What old lady?" And she said, "Well, the old lady I was just talking to." And her stepmom said, "Honey, when I pulled up to you, you were sitting by yourself." Elise said she never forgot that story, never will.
Isn't that amazing how some people can see, others cannot?
I believe that. I believe it's like, I talk to psychics, as you, and one thing that I ask them, I'm from Cleveland, so we have LeBron James. He's probably the greatest basketball player on the planet. And they said, I can throw a basketball, but believe me, you don't want to see me really play basketball. It's nothing like LeBron James. Some people are born with it, and some people aren't. Right. And, they all say the same thing. You can develop it to an extent, but yes, some people are just more tuned in.
A broken radio, so far away.
Yeah, this is a neat one, particularly for a fan of music. It's just such a neat little tie-in. This is a story of David in Michigan. He was a stonemason, and he had a radio that he'd take on the work site, the transistor radio. I date myself by saying that, transistor radio.
Nah, we all do, believe me.
But anyway, this radio had gotten wet and it stopped working. So when he came home, he brought it inside. But it wasn't working. It was dead. And anyway, he was talking at the dinner table with his wife, and the topic of his late sister, Lynn, came up. His late sister died in the early 70s, so this is some time ago. And he said he thought he was talking about her because it was near her birthday or anniversary of the death. Anyway, they were talking specifically about this woman, his sister, about her death and things that had happened and occurred around that time. And they were both sitting there, and the radio that had been broken and they brought inside came on. Now, stuff like that happens, but here's where it gets weird. A song that his sister used to sing came on the radio, So Far Away by Carole King. And he said it's one that his sister sang great. His sister was a very good piano player, and she could sing all of Carole King's songs, a great singer-songwriter. She's very talented. And he said what made it very strange wasn't like he had just talked about his sister Lynn a few minutes ago. They were talking about her at that very instant. He said it completely gave him chills. He told his family about it. His wife was there. She can verify it. And he says he believes in a lot of things, not everything. But in that case, he says that she was telling me she was so far away, and it just gives him the chills. But he believes it's a message, pure and simple.
It probably is. Now you have a haunted Christmas Eve story.
Oh, yes. What a mirror image we are. That's a weird one.
Almost done with the stories.
This is a gentleman, I believe he's in Connecticut, or at least he was staying in Connecticut with his family and friends.
Your memory, by the way, is phenomenal, Jim.
Well, I have a few notes.
Okay.
But anyway, this is Adam from Connecticut. And they had rented this cottage in Connecticut for Christmas, the family, the extended family. And he and one of his relatives were sleeping by the Christmas tree. And it was about 2:30 a.m., and he woke up and saw this tall figure at the top of the staircase. And the figure was just sitting there, and at first he thought it was a person. He thought maybe somebody had gone to the bathroom or was sleepwalking. He said he saw a kind of silhouetted figure. He couldn't make out any facial features or details, and it looked like he was wearing a tuxedo or something like that. Now imagine that. You're home for Christmas Eve. You're with your family, and some guy with a tuxedo shows up on the staircase. He said, now this...
Uninvited.
Uninvited. And this harkens back to the early story about the girl, the one we started with, the herky-jerky movement. He said the figure started walking down the stairs. It looked very strange, though. He said the best way he could describe it was like a puppet on a string, very unnatural. because again, he was assuming it was someone in the house. He said he got to the bottom of the stairs and they kind of started looking around. He could see the figure's head tilt back a little bit, almost like someone who had come home after a time and hadn't been there and acted as he's saying, God, it's great to be back. This figure was looking around in a weird wavy way is how he describes it. He said, then all of a sudden, this completely caught him off guard. This figure said in a very weird, deep male's voice, and I don't know what this means, "Oh, my love, what a mirror image we are." Adam says he gets chills just thinking about it. At that point, this thing was bobbing back and forth, looking around. It didn't seem to be looking at anybody particularly. And he said, again, it said, "Oh, my love, what a mirror image we are." He said it almost sounded like somebody saying it in a cave. It was a very weird, echoey type of quality. He said the apparition walked into another room that was off to the right of him and it never came back. He just kind of stayed there, and he didn't even get up to look for anybody because Adam says he was so baffled. He was up for about an hour, and nothing came back out of that room. He talked to his family. And he asked everybody, was anybody going up to the bathroom or looking around the house? He thought maybe somebody had had a little bit to drink and was kind of wandering around, and everyone said no. But his uncle did say, I meant to ask you guys, too, has anybody peeked their head into my room? He saw someone around 3 a.m. Adam just says it's one of those things that he'll never be able to explain, but he'll, again, never forget.
Our last story of the night before we get to calls. Some entity chasing a woman around the country?
Yeah, this is kind of an elaborate one, but I'll try to get through it quickly. This starts off in Richmond, Virginia. Our caller, Jennifer, was visiting a male friend in Richmond, Virginia, and they were going to spend the weekend kind of having a lot of fun and you know, hitting the night spots, I guess. But before they did that, she got in the early morning hours. Her friend, Carl, wanted to check his parents' house. They were away for the weekend, and he had promised to check on it and change the lights and do the things you do when somebody's out of town. So they started to head over there, and then all of a sudden he gets super apprehensive and says, you know, we really shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. The house is haunted. I've told you it's haunted, and I don't want to do this. And Jennifer insisted that they go. So basically they go. He's acting super stressed out, doesn't even want to get out of the car, but finally she convinces him to go. They both go on the porch. He turns the key in the lock, opens the door. A huge gust of wind comes out of the door, front door, knocks her onto the ground, okay? He's worried about her. She says, I'm okay. She's putting on a brave face for him. They go in. Then all kinds of weird stuff starts happening. You see a dark figure. All of a sudden they get this weird attack of vertigo, and finally they decide to get the heck out of there. And the thing is that it haunts them all weekend. They really can't have a good time because this weird experience is all they're thinking about. So anyway, time goes on. She kind of loses touch with her friend Carl, and then she goes back to her home, I believe, which was in North Carolina. Weird stuff starts happening there. She's got a 5-year-old son. Always slept through the night. All of a sudden he's saying there's voices.
Oh, boy.
She's working at her desk one day. She thinks somebody's broken into the house. There are footsteps and banging on doors and all kinds of things. Nothing. Then they moved to Albuquerque. Her and her son moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And it followed her?
Well, it was Halloween night 2004. She was trick-or-treating with her son. And her son and her went into a New Age bookstore. Boy goes up to the counter to get his candy. Attendant gives him the candy, looks at Jennifer, the mom, and says, would you mind talking to my boss? This woman comes through what I picture as beaded curtains and says, honey, you probably wonder why my assistant wanted me to talk to you. You have a beautiful aura, but there's something very nasty attached to you. Would you mind if I try to cleanse you? So, of course, Jennifer thought that this was some kind of shakedown, that she was asking for money. But she did incantations and so forth, and Jennifer said, well, do you want my money? She said, no, I wouldn't dream of asking for money for this. I just wanted to help you. She said, please come back whenever you can if you need to, because I don't know if this got rid of it. This is very, very nasty. So anyway, long story short, she reconnects with her friend Carl from several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They get together when she's traveling out east, and they get together and have lunch and a good time and talk. And he says, my parents' house that was haunted, since that night we've been there, nothing's ever happened. And she made a passing joke. Oh, well, if these spirits, and she told him what happened, she said, if these spirits have attached themselves to me from your parents' house, I hope they piggyback onto you and go back to your house. Kind of ha-ha, funny, right?
Really funny.
Really funny. So they go their separate ways. He goes back to his home, and then he goes to have lunch with his parents, as is his custom on the weekends. And he goes and has lunch with his family. It's on a Sunday. He comes back home, and he's going into his house, and the phone is ringing. And remember, the ghosts were gone from his parents' house. So anyway, he picks up the phone. It's his parents. I think it's his mom saying, the ghosts, Carl, the ghosts, they're back. They had basically gone across the country, came back with Jennifer, then piggybacked onto him, and went back home.
Simply went back home.
Yeah, very strange, very strange.
The whole story's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's very elaborate and over the course of the years. So what I find is we have some of these stories that span years, and then we have something that may be very simple, very short, very simple, but no less important to the storyteller.
I'm always fascinated with the real old stories of apparitions that just still hang around, Jim.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated about places like haunted prisons or
cemeteries.
Cemeteries, even things like theaters. Because you think about all the entertainers that have gone through various theaters and the idea that their spirits are there.
Well, that's true. Hospitals. And some of those entertainers have even died on stage. We're going to take phone calls next hour. Jim's going to stay with us, and you're next. Okay, Jim Harold, gracious enough to stand over an hour to take your phone calls with me or your ghost stories, and we'll dive right into them when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Jim Harold with us. Jim, let's go to the calls. They have been lining up for you for an hour. Let's go to Mark in Baltimore, Maryland to get things going. Mark, go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good, Mark. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say it's an honor to speak with you. I'm a first-time caller. I've been weaned on Coast to Coast AM since the Art Bell days.
Well, thank you. It's a long time you've been with us. Appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I had a cat. I adopted her directly from birth as soon as they were able to let me have her. Her name was Crystal, and she was born on December 14th, 2000. And I took her on December 16th, 2000. I took her in. She passed away on December 16th, 2014. She passed away on the same day that she died. Oh. It's on the paperwork, and it's on her ashes on the brass plate. And I have to say that my story should be good for True Ghost Story Spies. It's a joyous story because I hear her, I see her, and I feel her. I get glimpses of her at random times. I feel her at random times when I'm sitting on the chair that I'm sitting on right now. Whenever, she's supposed to be with me, I can feel her paws pressing on the chair. And sometimes I'll turn around and almost see the paw prints there. And when I hear her, as I walk in through the front door, I go, I know you're hungry. I know you're hungry. And, I am convinced that she is still here and she is still communicating with me, because even when I'm in bed sleeping, I feel something against my back. And I know that that's the way she used to sleep with me in bed. And so I know that in some unexplained way, shape, or form, I am completely and unequivocally convinced that her presence and her spirit is still communicating with me because we had such a special bond.
That is a great story. And Jim, these animal stories of this kind of connection, they happen a lot.
Yes, they do. In fact, I was just looking There's a story in my first book about that, about somebody who had a cat as well, Heidi from New York, and basically their cat had passed, very beloved family pet, and about a month after that, there was her, and I think it was her mom, felt something go past them, and they said, forgetting that the cat was no longer with them, oh, that was just the cat, and then they realized, well, the cat's gone. But they just saw the cat and felt it brush up against them. So I do believe in things like the Rainbow Bridge and the fact that, pets, it's very difficult to have a beloved pet and not believe pets have souls.
Why do they not move on? Do they love their owner that much that they just hang around?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe they're like human spirits. Maybe they can be here and there at different times, and maybe sometimes they choose to come back and pay a visit. I'd like to think that.
Let's go to Herman in Huntington Beach, California now. Hey, Herman, go ahead, sir.
Hello.
You with us?
Hello. It's good to be on the show.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I have a story from a few years back. Like when you're a little kid, your parents say there's nothing in the closet.
Oh yeah, but we know there's something there.
Yeah, there's definitely something in the closet. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I kept hearing these voices at night, just saying I'm here, wanting to talk to me. It's the weirdest. It's just weird because I immediately go back to when I was a little kid saying there's nothing in the closet, there's nothing under your bed. You get me?
I'm with you.
Okay. And it freaked me out. Like I thought I was just hallucinating for about a week or so.
Well, why is it that parents, Jim, don't believe?
Well, I think because we're conditioned, right? It's the same. I think it's the flip side of why kids do see things and do believe, because they're not yet conditioned. But, growing up, we're told there's not this, there's not that doesn't exist, there isn't something in the closet, there's no such thing as ghosts. And I think when you're conditioned so long, your heart in some way becomes hardened to the possibility, and I think it's the rare person who can have that kind of childlike belief that things, that we can't weigh on a scale or measure in a test tube exist.
Do we grow out of it? Because I'm sure almost all of us as kids thought something was in the closet or under the bed.
I wonder if part of it is, I think part of it is the conditioning, as I said, but another thing, if you look at these, the work of people like Jim B. Tucker and Ian Stevenson with children, University of Virginia, with children who have past life memories, but as they get older, those memories fade. I guess maybe part of it is the conditioning, but another part may be, like you said, maybe we just simply grow out of it and we lose some of that ability to see, feel, and experience these things.
And that is sad, I think.
It is. I would agree. It's much like, childhood in general. We lose things. I see it now. I have two daughters, and one's 12 and one's almost 16 or 15. And, you see every year, they're growing. You're very proud of them, but they always also lose a bit of that childlike innocence, and it is kind of bittersweet.
Let's go to John in Charleston, South Carolina. First-time caller for us. Hi, John. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I was real interested in listening to your comments about residual energy, and so I decided to give you a call.
Okay.
Back in June 8th of 1965, I just gotten out of the Army. I just come home from the 101st Airborne up at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And my then girlfriend and I were sitting together on a picnic table which faced the northeast side of Kennesaw Mountain, Battlefield Park. That's just north of Atlanta. In those days, it was a very isolated place before the urban sprawl covered the area. So it was a very nice place to sit and watch the moon come up. Anyway, we were sitting there, and we both saw a white, bluish image of a figure about 40 to 50 yards out in the pasture at the base of the mountain. Now, this pasture in the Civil War was where several thousand men were killed in the fighting that went on for about 3 weeks there. I asked my girlfriend, Alice, did you see that? And she was a good Roman Catholic girl and replied, yes, she had seen it, and her hands were gripping my arm. Her fingernails were clawing pretty deep. And I could see that the figure had a head and shoulders and lower legs, but the feet were very indistinct. There weren't any features that I could make out, just a distinct outline. So I stood up and I said, let's have a closer look, as she was still clutching my arm. I told her I was going to approach it, and she very reluctantly followed me. So I jogged toward it, literally pulling her, and the figure appeared to glide with no bobbing motion as it would, do in running. It began to recede as I approached, and I sprinted. Back in those days, I could run pretty fast. And I ran to the first curve up the mountain road and never got closer than 40 to 50 yards out, and it shimmered and vanished. I spent the rest of the evening calming down the girlfriend.
And maybe yourself, too.
That's it.
Jim, does anybody ever get hurt from a ghost?
I've never... Well, I gave that example earlier where the person, the woman with the rats, she got slapped and had welts. So I guess, I would pose the same question. Can ghosts or entities, particularly ones that may not be so nice, cause harm? And what people have told me, and again, I'm not an expert. I answer questions, but one thing I thought was very interesting. One interview subject told me once. I can't recall who it is, and I apologize, but they said that one of these entities couldn't necessarily directly hurt you, but they could create the circumstances where you could be hurt.
Like a bookcase that falls on you or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting take on it. Okay. I don't know. I would think it would be hard. I think when we talked about the guardian angel, I think there are also things out there that protect us, but would I say it's impossible? I don't think it's impossible.
Well, with the caller's story, trying to calm his girlfriend down, I would have just hightailed it out of there.
As soon as possible. And a brave man, thanks for his service to the country. But,
absolutely.
But sometimes the kind of otherworldly things can be a little more frightening than the things that are here.
You wouldn't stay all the time, would you? If you sense some danger, would you be out of there?
I would get out of there. I'm not. I never said I was brave.
But smart. Let's go to Sylvia in Chatsworth, California now. Hey, Sylvia, thank you. Go ahead.
Hey, hi. How are you guys doing?
Everything's good.
Hey.
Beautiful. I just wanted to share a story that did happen to me. I'm actually writing a book on angels,
good for you.
Good and bad. So, I'm going to share just one of the stories. It's going to be kind of short. I was over a friend's house in San Diego, and I was actually making her big pot soup. And there was, all that day, I kept hearing this song that I heard from my childhood, all night, all day, angels watching over me, my Lord. So I just started singing it. I was singing it the whole day, and I didn't even know why that popped in my head. So while I was cooking her food, I was standing directly beneath one of those really heavy glass globes that covered the light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
And I kid you not, and I know it was an angel. Oh, God is good. I felt this push in the middle of my back that pushed me close to the stove. I didn't burn myself. As soon as that happened, that globe came crashing down.
Wow!
It could have killed me.
It was loose. It was loose, and it would have you could have been shattered with glass all over the place on you.
Yes, and it crashed, and it kind of scratched. It would have cut my Achilles too, the way it fell. You could tell.
Would have sliced your head.
Oh yeah, something was going to happen because the way it hit, it should have cut it. Because it was a very small apartment kitchen.
Well, see, Jim, this comes back to your bookcase story.
Yes.
Something is... Now, here's the question. Is it an angel? Is it some kind of apparition that steps in to save us? Or is it that thing that's built into us, that precognitive intuitiveness that gives us that ability to just react to some future event?
Yeah, I think this, for example, you were talking about the scientist you had on yesterday. I think that scientist would say it's some kind of if he believes in it at all, he would say it's some kind of biological defense mechanism. Maybe maybe on some level the woman with the bookcase, maybe she could hear subconsciously creaking of the bookcase coming loose from its moorings. I think they would say something like that if they believe in it at all. I think that's a little too pat. I tend to think there is something watching out for us. Are they guardian angels? Are they past loved ones? What could they be? And then I think you got to ask the other question: when somebody dies in a horrible way and a tragedy happens, why wasn't their guardian angel on
Why didn't
duty
they step in?
Yeah, and that's a question that I have. Because I don't think you can just rubber stamp all of this stuff. You have to be contrarian, even if it's in your own mind sometimes. So they're tough questions.
Let's go to Paul in Kentucky now, east of the Rockies. Paul, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Hello, George.
Hi, Paul.
How are you tonight?
Good.
Oh, this is a great show of it, and I wanted to tell you, you and I are close to the same age. I'm 62.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and,
keep going.
Yeah, I'm glad you're still on the bridge, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Back around the 1960s, early 60s, about the time kids start camping out in the backyard, the alleys on our street, and it was on a big hill, were unpaved and gravel. And a mist would often come up in the alleys in the spring and early spring and later in the fall. And we could see people in the fog, and we called them fog people. Well, along came technology, and Channel 32, VHF television started to fall away, and UHF came online, and what ended up happening is we started watching horror shows. We weren't afraid of them. You have to learn to be afraid.
That's right.
And we saw horror shows, and we got afraid to camp out in the backyard when it would get foggy like that, but they seemed to float along in the fog and not actually move in the lower body, and it's such a distinct memory. And so many of us saw them. And later on in our teenage years, and they had paved the alleys, well, we played kick the can, but the perimeters became the whole block because we were in our teens, and one of the girls got grabbed right back there in the area where these ghost people or fog people we would see them walking, and of course we all ran. She was screaming her head off, and we all ran, and we didn't see anything, but it's just an interesting story because that entire block was haunted.
Jeez. And did they let her go?
Yes, but the block was haunted, George. My house, there was another house, the meanest kid on the street. Everybody had a street. This kid was so mean that I think his parents had to push his food across the floor to him. I mean, he was just mean. And he delivered papers, and he passed this one old house. It was one of the oldest houses on the street. And at 17 years old, he came home screaming to his mother. He saw ghosts in the front yard, would never deliver papers again.
And I bet he was never mean again either.
Nope, that cured him.
It sure did.
In the 1980s, there was a young couple that moved in a house on the other end of the street, and a friend of mine and I used to fly model airplanes all the time, control lines, so that dates me real good. And she was crying, and we thought, well, we'll just walk down there and talk to her. And she said, I'm not going back in there because of ghosts. And we said, sweetheart, that's just the way the street is. And in my own home, I had no way to record it, but I actually watched a door from, I'm a ham operator. I had the indicator lights on some of my equipment on, and I came in late, and my wife and I watched the door of my room open and close, but not in one movement. It kind of shook back and forth. No wind, no nothing, early in the morning, and it was in March.
You had a lot of problems over there, Paul. I'm glad you got out of it okay. Those are one of those neighborhood blocks that you just don't want to live on. Hey, we're going to come back in a moment here on Coast to Coast AM and take some final phone calls with Jim Harold before open lines begin. Nothing like a little Tony Bennett, huh? Hey, it's time for our shout-out to those of you who listen to Coast on our 600 radio stations across North America. Thank you. Coast Insiders, thank you, of course, for everything you do. And XM Talk Channel 102. Most of you are truck drivers out there enjoying the moment. Thank you. And then the various chat rooms. And that brings me to make this quick announcement. The fine chat room of Into Infinity that is put together by the administrator, Sean. Our condolences to Sean on the death of his wife, Coletta. Happened this week. Very tragic. Very sad. Sean has been a supporter of Coast to Coast for as long as I can remember. And, Sean, our deepest condolences go out to you. The other chat rooms, of course, thank you for what you do. Imaginative World, Sorcery IRC, Northern Kentucky Paranormal Group, the SoCal UFO Meetup Group, the Hollywood Ghost Hunters, and our buddy Greg the Cook in St. Louis. Still doing your thing, Greg? Thanks for supporting Coast to Coast AM. Okay, here we go. Let's go to Greg in Central Valley, New York, to get things started. Greg, welcome to the program. You're on with us. Go ahead.
George, great show. Jim, you've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I was hoping maybe you could share with us again the name of the professor from the university that was exploring the childhood recollection of past lives.
Oh, yes. Yes, I can. Thank you for the question. I think it's amazing work as well. Jim B. Tucker, I believe he's with the University of Virginia, and he has a book out, and also he was featured on the Today Show just in the last couple of months with a fascinating story about a young boy who had claimed to be reincarnated from a 1930s, 1940s Hollywood actor who actually acted with Mae West in her first movie.
And it was a secondary actor. It wasn't a great big one.
Yeah, it was a bit player. It wasn't like John Wayne or anything we're talking about. And and Tucker has carried on the work of Ian Stevenson, I believe was his name. I believe he's deceased now, who also worked at the University of Virginia. And they've looked at these kids through different cultures and so forth over many decades, who say they have past life memories. And to me, that's a fascinating aspect of all these topics we cover.
All right, let's go to Jerry now in Toronto. By the way, I'll be in Toronto in August. More information at the website, georgenorrielive.com. Jerry, you got to come out and see me again.
Hi, George.
Good to have you here.
I have something very important to tell you, George. Please pay attention, okay?
We will do our best.
George, the water around you is warm.
Oh, you're always sending those special messages, but I don't know what they are. Can you figure it out? What's it mean, Jim?
I'm not exactly sure. It sounds like he may be on his own wavelength, but it sounds like an interesting place to be.
It does. Let's go to South Carolina. Scott's with us east of the Rockies. Scotty, go ahead.
Hey.
Good to have you with us.
I'm the first-time caller, and I'd like to tell you what happened to me regarding my girlfriend who passed away. She had a heart defect, and we didn't know about it, and she passed away in her sleep. Well, after she passed away, for the first 2 weeks, nothing really happened, and then she had 2 cats. And it was like someone was trying to reach down and touch these cats, and these cats would run crazy from room to room. Well, I didn't think too much about it at the time, but then I started seeing these little lights that would come into our house and just float around. And I thought I was going crazy, and I was checking the lights out, looking outside to see if a car was coming. There was no cars. And then I would sit down at the computer and remember the old send box on the computer for AOL. I'd get messages on the computer, and without me even typing, they'd show up in the send box. Well, it was a big house, and since I drive a truck for a living, the lady next door, it was divided into 2 apartments, she would collect my mail. Well, one day, she knocked on the door, and I got up. I was laying down taking a nap and went to answer the door, and guess who was sitting on my couch?
There you go.
It was my girlfriend. And it was, I stopped dead in my tracks, and I said, are you okay? And she just looked at me expressionless and vanished. So it was, really strange. But I wasn't frightened. I wasn't scared. I was just more concerned that, why is she still here?
Were you relieved?
I wasn't really relieved. I was sort of shocked, but I was more concerned of why hadn't she moved on and went to heaven or whatever.
Why is that, Jim Harold? Why does sometimes they just merely don't go away?
Well, from what I've been able to gather by talking to people who are experts, is the thought that maybe a place was particularly important to them. They felt very comfortable there. Again, obviously, the caller, and my condolences to the caller, they had a strong relationship, and that was part of it. So, I mean, I don't know the answer, but I have to believe that, there's two sides of the coin. One, people, if you think about somebody in a prison, why would you want to stay in a prison? Maybe those people are so tortured they can't tear themselves away, or even we hear people who get out of prison these days and do something to go back because that's where they feel comfortable. In this case, maybe because it's a loving environment.
Well, maybe so. So with Campfire books 1, 2, and 3, then they're all available now. Were they just stories that, were different stories each book?
Yeah, there's a total of there's over 200 stories total. Each book has about 70 stories in it. And the cool thing is, if you're one of the Kindle people, you can get it very inexpensively. It's like $2.99 per book, and you can even get one that includes all three. That's really cheap if you're a Kindle reader, or you can use their app. And then if you're a paperback person, we have it in paperback too. And you can find it at Amazon by just searching for Jim Harold or going over to jimharold.com, and the links are over there.
We go to Joe in the Bronx. Good morning, Joseph.
Hey, George, how are you?
Okay.
I'd like to ask your guest, Jim, something after I relay a story.
Sure.
I'm a songwriter, and I had some writer's block going on. This was about 2004. And I was having a difficult time finishing this song. I'm a lyricist. And my deceased brother came into my room, walked past the foot of my bed, and he had some words for me. He simply said, "Just get it done," and proceeded to disappear into a wall in my bedroom, and I was able to finish the song shortly after that. Now, I wanted to ask Jim, since I haven't really seen him since, that was the first and only time, is there a way that I could get him to appear again? I mean, is there something that I could do to, facilitate that?
Well, again, I'm not necessarily expert in guiding people on how to do these things. Maybe meditate on him, maybe think on him, contemplate him. Maybe some of those things might
not easy to conjure them up, Jim.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's my thought. Maybe that's the one and only time that he felt that he needed to come to you. Maybe he knew you were in a bad place in terms of artistically, and you couldn't make that, and he knew he could give you that extra push. So maybe he hasn't felt the need to come through again. So maybe he'll come back when and if he thinks the time is right.
Maybe. And then maybe not.
And maybe not.
Let's go to Ann in Los Angeles now. Ann, it's your turn on Coast to Coast. Go ahead.
Good evening, George and Jim. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a question for you, Jim, but it's a twofold reason. One reason I want to ask George something and you something. In all your books, do you have a story that was quite popular in Los Angeles many, many years ago, and it's still around sometimes, but a lot of people also have it in their country. It's about a girl who met a boy at a dance hall, and they sort of hit it off. She got cold. He lent her the jacket. He walked her home. And the next day he went for the jacket, and he asked the lady at the door if the daughter was there. And she says, "I don't have a daughter." And he said, "Yes, she came here last night. I brought her here. I lent her my coat." And she says, "Look, that picture behind you on the mantle, that's her." And she says, I'm sorry, sir, my daughter's been dead a long time.
Oh.
And she says,
I think, is that Resurrection Mary? Is that the story that you're talking about, I think?
I don't know what they call it. Everybody has a different name. The reason I'm asking you...
Yeah, I believe, well, it's not in my books, but I have, we've talked about it. Tom Ogden is an author who's done a lot of great haunted books. If you're into this stuff, definitely check him out. And I believe he has Haunted Cemeteries, I believe is the book. And I believe within that book, O-G-D-E-N, Tom Ogden, I believe within that book is a story about Resurrection Mary.
Yeah, she's Chicago, though. I think she said Los Angeles.
Right,
Resurrection Mary's in the Chicago area.
But what I'm wondering is, you said that she said that it was popular in many areas. I wonder if that's been imported into.
Well, let's Andy, you talking about the Chicago episode, or was it in L.A.?
Well, the Los Angeles one. The reason I ask is because I saw her as a child.
Oh, wow!
And I wanted to tell George. I know you remember this. You remember the movie The Uninvited with Gail Russell?
I sure do.
Carmela, the mimosa scent.
Yeah.
Okay. I saw her when before I was 7. I was under 7 years old. My stepbrother and his father lived across the street from the cemetery, which is the one on East LA on 1st Street. And he was a CHP officer, my stepdad.
Wow.
And he was in his room. My mom was on the sofa. And my stepbrother says, are you asleep? I said, yeah, I'm talking to you. That's why I'm asleep.
That's a great story. No, it's not Resurrection Mary, though, but there's another one out there. Jim, there's a million of them. You could write Campfire books 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah, well, I'm working on 4 right now. That should be out this fall. But I'll tell you, you're right, because as we talked about before, everybody's got a story, and that doesn't make them any less valid or any less compelling. Everybody's story is important to them. If it's the family cat or if it's their mom or whoever it might be, it's important to them, and we should really value those.
We'll go to Louisville, Kentucky now. Jamie's with us on Coast to Coast. Hi, Jamie. Go ahead.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Great to be on the program. This is my second time calling. I've been listening for about 6 years now.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful program. My father-in-law passed on about 7 years ago, and after the funeral and all, the cemetery was next door to the funeral home and such. My wife and I, we decided we'd go have early dinner or whatever across the highway. Well, we're at this national chain restaurant, and we're sitting down, ordering our food and talking, and her dad comes in to the restaurant, sits down across the way from us. He's wearing the same suit that we just buried him in, the shirt, the tie. He was a veteran, and we had put a flag pin on his collar, and it was there, and we were talking back and forth to one another, she and I, and I said, that's it, I'm getting up, I'm going to talk to him. So I said, hello, sir, how are you doing? And then he said, son, and he always called me son. I said, well, a lot of people say that. But, so I was talking to him, I said, can I sit down for a minute with you? He said, sure. And I said, if you don't mind me saying, we just buried my father-in-law and everything. And he said, you don't have to go any further. I am him.
I am him?
Oh, wow.
Which is what you thought.
Exactly. And, see, he had Alzheimer's. And he could articulate and stuff and all.
But this one could.
Oh, my, very much so. And this happened 2 other occasions at the same restaurant across the highway from there.
Well, how did he leave? How did he depart finally?
Well, he was getting up in age, and like I said, he had Alzheimer's, and he was a veteran. And he passed on, you know, in the evening or in his sleep, whatever. But train of thought, there we go. We told a lot of people about this, and we didn't go back to that restaurant anymore. But
I guess not.
We've passed by, you know, to pay our respects, and then look back towards the restaurant. He's standing outside waving hello.
He's still there.
Yes. And one other person, he had a caretaker, and the lady's granddaughter, he was very close to, and such. We told her, and she actually went to the restaurant, and he came to her.
I love that. I like the fact that they go to some certain spots, Jim, that they probably always enjoyed.
Yeah, I would think that would be true. You think we were talking about haunted theaters before. You know, it doesn't always have to be gloom and doom and torment. You know, actors and so forth on the stage, those were their highlights of their life. So to come back and reenact those plays, or in this case, like this gentleman, what happened with him, which is a remarkable story, reliving past glories. It's really interesting.
Time for one or two more. Jersey City, New Jersey. Let us go to Dora on Coast to Coast. Dora, go ahead.
Hi, George. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well.
Okay. George, hello, and Jim, hello.
Hello.
George, my name is Dora. I am from Cuba, and Cuba keep the paranormal very secret.
Yeah, they sure do.
Yes, very secret. They know a lot. I born gifted child. When the gifted child, when we are 7, the parents say, don't talk nothing, what you see or what you feel, don't talk. So we grow up, but I am big mouth, so I'm going to talk now.
Oh, go ahead. We've got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Hey, George, cut me when you have to cut. George, I hear you talk about Coral Castle many times.
Uh-huh.
Okay. My boyfriend was a wealthy man. And we were driving by Coral Castle. I saw Coral Castle one time, and this was second time we driving.
Yep, that's a beautiful place down in Florida, Coral Castle.
Yes. I told him, stop, Coral Castle is for sale. I want you to buy Coral Castle. And he said, come on, it's no sign, no nothing. I say, stop. So, George, I went inside, you know, it's a little store in the front.
Uh-huh.
And I went to the lady and I said, how much you want for Coral Castle? George, do you believe the lady got in shock? Because she said, how do you know that?
They did sell it. You're right.
Yes, but she said, how do you know that? Because it's in secret. Listen, she said, we haven't put in public, no sign, no nothing. So I said, I got the feeling that it was for sale. George, the man that built Coral Castle.
Edward Leeds Skolnin.
Uh-huh. Ed, I believe, was medium.
He may be, and he told you. Anyways, did you end up buying it?
No, because my boyfriend don't believe in anything. He say, I'm not going to buy rocks. George.
He didn't want to buy rocks, huh?
No, he was.
He would have made a fortune as a tourist attraction.
But he don't believe it.
Well, he would have. Well, we're out of time here. Jim, thank you. Good luck with everything you do. Keep in touch, all right?
I will do. Thank you, sir.
All righty. Jim Harold and all his books, of course, you can find on his websites linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Hey, I'm coming back in a moment with open lines, plus I'm going to tell you my own creepy story that happened today. Unbelievable. And welcome back to the open line portion now of Coast to Coast AM. Boy, I had a creepy story today for me. I was at the post office. I parked my car, and as I was leaving, I was going past the mailboxes that people just drive up and drop things off, and off they go. Standing between the two mailboxes was a woman who must have been in her late 60s, early 70s. Really thin, wearing a very small black cowboy-type looking hat, almost like a derby hat. Her face was whiter than white. I'm telling you, it didn't look like makeup. It was just someone who just looked dead. And she had her head down. As I'm driving right past her, she lifts her head up. I'm about 6 feet away from her. Both her eyes were stark black. You couldn't see anything. Couldn't see the pupils, the retinas, nothing. Stark black. With this ghostly white face, wearing this little outfit. She was a little skinny person. Must have been, again, close to 70. And she had this weird smile on her face. And I'm telling you, I just kept going. Anyways, we're going to come back with open line calls in a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast, and let us go to the open line calls. Let's pick it up by going, first of all, to Richard in Northern Ireland. We're going a long way on this one. Hello, Richard.
Good morning, George.
Good morning to you, too. How is everything your way?
The sun is shining, George, and it's going to be a bright, sunny day.
Perfect.
And just wanted to say, I enjoyed Jim Harold being on. I do get his podcasts. I download them. I'm a Coast Insider as well, and I download the Coast Insider podcast. But I enjoyed Jim Harold tonight. Really, really fascinating subject.
They are. I love them. All of them.
Yeah, and I was just saying to your producer there, just saying that hopefully maybe we can get a sponsorship sorted out, and maybe you can come to this side of the pond.
Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. All right, Richard, thanks, and be safe out there. It's a long way, Northern Ireland. We are worldwide these days. We go to Terry, truck driving in Alabama. Welcome to Open Lines on Coast to Coast, Terry.
Yeah, hello, George. Good to call, first-time caller.
Where are you driving? Where are you headed these days?
I am headed to Arkansas through Memphis right now. I'm on I-22.
That's not a bad drive. What's going on? What's up?
Well, I wanted to share with you and your guests there, me and my brother about when I'm going to be 60. This is about 50 years ago. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and we had me and my brother had just laid down. We had a deal where our parents used to make us go to bed by 10 o'clock. So we had just laid down in our room, turned off the lights, and had twin beds. I was on one side of the room, he's on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
Had heavy curtains, blinds on all the windows, pitch black room, and all of a sudden our room just lit up, illuminated with a bright white light. Where I'm sitting there, and my brother goes, Terry, do you see what I'm seeing? And I said, yeah, the room's all lit up. And he says, yeah. He goes like, where's it coming from? And I'm going like, it's not coming from the window, and it's just like not coming on. I mean, the whole thing is just like every piece of air is lit up, and we're sitting there for about over a minute, and then all of a sudden it just goes pitch black, goes out. So we start going, what the heck? And then start calling for our parents because we're like 10 and 11. So finally my dad comes into the room and we say, hey, it's on the room lit up. And he says, oh, it's just a light coming in. I said, no, the windows are all covered up. And he says, oh, go back to sleep. It's almost midnight. And we're looking at it and kind of wondering what the heck, because we had just laid down. It's 10. He says it's almost midnight, and we're going.
You lost 2 hours.
Couldn't figure out what the heck happened.
Do you think you two were abducted?
I have no idea, George. All I know is if my brother hadn't been there as a witness, I would have thought I was crazy.
Yeah, this missing time is happening just way too much to way too many people. And we get the text messages and Skype, by the way. Skype phone number is George97313. But, Tom, you've got a text message for us. What do you have?
I do, from Carrie in Miami, Florida. Cryogenics is a fascinating subject to me. I was wondering if it's possible that a person who has been frozen could feel the cold, or if their mind might still be active even though they're frozen. What do you think?
Well, technically, they're dead already. When they get frozen, they don't freeze them while they're alive. No, these people have died, but they hope that modern science and medicine will bring them back to life again when they figure out, maybe we can cure this or that. But So they don't feel it when they're in that cryogenic chamber.
What was that movie where with the anesthesia? Remember where people thought they were under, but they weren't, and they'd feel everything?
Oh, that's a horrible situation.
Well, could it happen here?
That's not. No. Cryogenics, Tom, they're already dead. And the other thing, you're going in for an operation, and the anesthesiologist doesn't put you under as much as he should have, and so you're in this state of what I would call limbo, where you can't move, you can't talk, but you're alert. Your brain is awake. And so, the doctor, let's say, has got to cut your leg or cut it off, right? You literally can hear the saw and feel the pain of the cutting.
But
horrible.
What if they froze you if they thought you were dead, but you weren't?
Well, the odds of that happening are pretty remote.
Probably.
Yeah. People who are in cryogenic chambers are dead, and they're hoping that science one day, and they've got a lot of people in these chambers who have paid money for this, hoping that one day that science will resurrect and cure whatever killed them.
Would you do that?
No.
I wouldn't either.
No. I would not do that.
Too weird.
You know the Ted Williams story.
Yeah.
He died. They have his head in a cryogenic chamber, and hopefully one day they want to clone him and then download his brain into the clone brain.
How long has he been like that? Do you know?
Oh, Ted, he's been dead about, 15, 20 years now?
So wouldn't people be smarter, though, by the time they figured it out to unfreeze him?
Who knows? Okay, thanks, Tom. We'll take another text from you around the corner next half hour. Let's go to Linda in Bloomington, Illinois. Linda, good morning.
Hey, George. Did you hear your newscast just now when it was on there?
No, I did not.
Oh, well, they're talking about making artificial sperm for men that can't produce it.
Oh, and wonder what kind of babies that would make.
I don't know. Anyhow, that's not what I call it about. In 1963, we had just gotten out of the military, and we went back home to our home state here in Illinois, and there was a little house that came up for rent, so we took it. And we had a daughter, and we moved in, and we were told that there was an elderly couple that had lived there, and the wife got put into a nursing home, and he stayed in the house. Well, he was standing there, I guess, looking out the front window and had a heart attack, and he passed away.
Right there. Oh.
Right there. We didn't know this at the time. But anyway, and I was young and dumb. I didn't know any of this stuff about ghosts or nothing. We go to bed. They told us that in the basement, which was almost directly underneath our bedroom, there was a bunch of stuff that had been in the house, and they took a blue tarp and threw it over it. So we'd go to bed at night, and you could hear somebody go down the basement steps. We'd get up and go look, and there'd be nothing there. And then other times we'd hear, like, somebody going through all that stuff that was underneath that tarp in the basement. And the next day I'd go down there and look, and nothing had been touched. It didn't look like anything had been touched. Now here comes the creepy part. I had a bridal shower that I was going to go to, and I volunteered to make an extra sheet cake for the shower. So I get into the cabinet to get something, and a can of green beans went flying right out of the cabinet into the middle of the cake. I was so upset over that, but that isn't the worst part. A couple of weeks later, we decided to go for a Sunday afternoon ride, and I had made roast and all this stuff for dinner, and we ate, and I cleaned everything up, and then I slid the roast into the cabinet because it was still hot yet. I figured when we get home, I'd make open-faced sandwiches. We come home, no roast.
What do you mean no roast? It's gone?
No roast. Gone. No roast, no plate. We tore that house apart looking for that roast.
You've got some ghost who had one heck of a roast.
Well, see, the doors were locked, too. So there was no way anybody could have gotten in there.
To take it, no.
And the roast was completely gone.
Well, whatever was in that cabinet the first time has been doing some very strange things to you.
Well, to this day, as I sit here, God is my witness, I have no idea what happened to that roast.
That's bizarre.
It is. But see, now, after coming into Art Bell in your show, and I look back on it,
Then it makes sense.
It makes sense.
Then you
but
can,
at the time,
then you can understand. Hey, thanks for the call. There's an area in New Hampshire that years ago was an area of UFO flaps. It was Exeter, New Hampshire. Mike is calling there, east of the Rockies. Hey, Mike, any more UFO flaps up there anymore?
Not lately, George, no.
Boy, in the old days, though, they sure had many.
Yeah, they were. And, well, actually, I didn't call for that, but actually, now that you mention it, Exeter, which a lot of people don't know, the Exeter, the incident in Exeter.
A great story.
You know how the UFOs pretty much seem to conglomerate around, nuclear facilities.
That's right.
Which a lot of people don't know is in 47 back in Roswell, when, obviously when that happened, the 509th Bomber Wing was out in that area, which is the group that dropped the bomb on, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the 60s, they actually transferred that unit to Pease Air Force Base and right up the street here from Exeter. The same bomber wing that, was out in Roswell, and not long after that, that's when the incident here happened.
I didn't know that. That's an interesting take of that.
Yeah, and now they disbanded it. They closed the base, and now that same unit is the one that flies the B-2 bomber out in, I think, Edwards or something out in California.
Okay, Air Force Base, yeah.
But anyways, I was listening to the spooky stories earlier, and it reminded me of something that happened with me and my wife about 16 years ago. We were living in a house in Amesbury, Massachusetts, which is not far off the border from where I live. And the house was built in the 1600s. And I was, someone that never really believed in ghosts. I was kind of, skeptical because it was one of the people, I have to see it to believe it.
Sure. And nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Right. So one night I go to hop in bed, and as I'm jumping in bed, kind of like out of the corner of my eye, the bedroom door was open. I saw something go by, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, what the heck? And my wife says, what's the matter? I'm like, geez, you're not gonna believe me if I tell you. You're gonna think I'm crazy. She's like, well, what's up? And I'm like, I could have sworn I just saw an old lady go by the door. I couldn't tell if she was wearing a dress or a gown, but it was white, and she had whitish, silverish hair.
The old hag.
Right. So we talked about it for a few minutes, forgot about it. A couple weeks later, middle of the night, my daughter comes in. She was probably 6 or 7, and she stands at the end of the bed, and she's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And I'm sleeping kind of half awake. I wasn't waiting for her to answer.
Yeah.
Finally, she did, and the first thing out of her mouth was, who is that old lady standing at the end of your bed?
Oh, my God.
So I sat up immediately, looked at my wife. She looked, and we never said anything about it. We looked at each other and like, what? So she, explained it, and we're like, oh, wow, forgot about it. About a month later, I got some family over the house, and my brother-in-law, I'm in the kitchen cooking, and my brother-in-law is in the living room, and he's whining about how sick he is and everything. and then he comes out of his mouth, he's like, oh, my God, I got to have a fever. I just saw some old lady wearing a white dress standing on the porch.
Oh, my.
I come running out of the kitchen. My wife comes out of the bedroom. We look at each other and like, what did you say? So we said it again. And we're just like, what the heck? And we had never told anybody.
Did you ever figure out who she was?
Well, a little bit after that, the dog stops in my daughter's room, stopped looking up, and I swear this is true. I'm not feeding you no wine.
No, I believe
the dog stopped looking up on the wall, barking at like the top part of the wall and the ceiling. We couldn't figure out why. And around the same time, my daughter had like one of those musical keyboards that had some different symbols you could press and play.
Yeah.
It had no batteries in it, and the thing played for a good 60 days, and we couldn't figure out for the life of us.
No power source.
Nothing. No batteries in it at all.
Wow.
I opened it up I'm a mechanic. I opened it up trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with it, and it just kept playing. We come to figure out that it must have been her grandmother had passed away a few months earlier.
Okay.
and she fit the description perfect. At the time, we just didn't really think about it, and afterwards, it made perfect sense, and it was just something I wanted to share on with you.
Hey, Mike, did the grandmother ever come to the house when she was alive?
She did. Only a couple times, but she mostly, when me and my wife had got married, she was old, pretty old, and she was in her late 80s, early 90s, and she was pretty frail. And she always wore a gown, like a white gown with, flowers on it and stuff like that.
She was
she
obviously
pretty much stayed on the couch.
She was attached. She was attached to your wife or somebody in the family, I guess.
Right, and it's all family members that saw her. That's the thing, too, And it was pretty crazy, and ever since then, it definitely changed my view on everything.
That would do it. Hey, that's a great story. Let's go to Prescott, Arizona. Carrie Ann, west of the Rockies. Good morning, Carrie Ann.
Good morning, Mr. George.
And how are you today?
I'm great. I have a story about a celebrity acting all uptight and crazy.
Okay.
Yes, this was back in 2008, and I was at a concert that had all these various musicians performing throughout the evening. During the last performance, a bunch of us in the first row decided to make our way down to standing room only to be closer to the stage. And Les Stroud from Survivor Man was one of the performers, and he was down there taking video for his blog.
All right.
He was so distracted by his camera that he just slammed right into me, nearly knocked me over. I mean, I weigh like 95 pounds, and he's a pretty big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smack.
And, a normal person would have studied me and made sure I was okay and apologized.
Sure.
But,
picked you up.
Yeah. He just glared at me like I had kicked his puppy or something.
Like it was your fault.
And, yeah, his nostrils were flaring and everything. Yeah, and they pushed past me, nearly knocked me over again, and just stormed off. And I had never seen anything like that.
Well, I tell you, some people are rude. They just don't have any manners at all. I saw a guy when I was at the post office today, seeing that ghostly, strange woman. When I was inside, there was a guy there who was opening the doors for people, a customer. And, going way out of his way to do some very kind things. But in your particular case, you just met up with somebody who just doesn't get it. Anyway, we're going to come back in a moment here on Coast to Coast AM, and we'll take your final open line calls. Don't touch your dial. Well, manning the desk Saturday, Connie Willis, and then Sunday, Lisa Garr, with some great programs for you here on Coast to Coast AM. And when I come back in just a moment, we'll take final open line calls. Don't go away. Well, welcome back to Coast to Coast. Hey, don't forget to remember your mom. God willing, she's still around for you. Mine is going to be 86 at the end of May. And a little program note for you on Memorial Monday, the end of May. It's just in a few weeks. We'll have a live program for you, too. Okay? Let's go back to the phones, and let us pick it up by going to Oscar in Orlando, Florida. Oscar, welcome to the program.
Well, hello, Mr. George.
Hi, Oscar. How are you?
Good. I called in before. I'm the newspaper guy. I told you.
Oh, that's right. Sure thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to call and wanted to share a couple of things. When this comes from my mother, we used to talk a lot. My mother's also almost 86. She's going to be 84. But she always said when I was a kid that when people die, they come to say goodbye.
Ah, she might be right.
Yeah, and I experienced that as well as she did. She always experienced that with my dad. They used to tell me stories. Either a relative or a friend would die, they'll experience that. And the first time that it happened to me, it was when my father died. There was people at the house, that had come, and we were sitting around the house. My father had disappeared. We didn't know what had happened to him, and everybody was sitting in the living room, and the dishes were all done, and suddenly we hear this big, loud sound that all the dishes were broken in the kitchen, and everybody ran up to the kitchen because nobody was there.
Yeah.
And suddenly, the dish rack was inside the sink, so it couldn't fall off. You know, it was inside, and all the dishes and everything was broken on the floor. And then my mother said, he's gone. He came to say goodbye.
She knew.
And yeah, and everybody around the room, that just the people were visiting us, they got up and they left. They got all spooked up. You know, I never did. You know, we just clean it up and things like that.
Did you ever find out where your father went?
No, we never did. And, you know, like I told you, I came from Central America, and then that was the reason that we came to the States, because we had to leave our country. But,
yeah,
you know, it happened again here in the States when I used to own the restaurant. A couple of my customers, I was sitting in the middle of the afternoon, you know, having coffee. It was low down.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this big, loud bang in the back in the dish room in the restaurant. And we're all sitting in the front, the waitress and the cook and everybody. So we run to the back, and all the dishes fall off.
Same thing.
The same thing.
You need to tell your father to stop breaking the dishes.
Yeah. But actually, there was one of my customers, the guy's daughter come back about an hour later and tell me that her father had passed away.
Yeah, that's something. Well, your mother was right, Oscar. She was right. I mean, they do come back with signs and messages. Let's go to Angelina, truck driving in Las Vegas, west of the Rockies. Hello, Angelina.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call
tonight. You are very welcome.
I have a short story I wanted to share with you that I really don't share with anybody because it's kind of weird, and I just kind of would like to know what you think about it.
All right. Well,
so,
you can say anything weird on this program.
So when I was about 10 years old, my father was in the mining business, and we moved from his mining, where his mines were while he was mining as I was growing up. And one of the mill sites that we had was out on the California-Nevada border, maybe about 2 or 3 miles behind that state line right there. And one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard a whole bunch of helicopters outside, and it's just us out there. There's no one else. So my father got up, we all heard it, and there was about 6 or 8 helicopters, and they were escorting something. And the something had, like, these red lights on it, and everything was blinking. They were moving really, really slow, and I'd say within maybe 6 or 7 minutes, everybody stopped, everything stopped, and this thing just took off like it left a dust trail of light. And the next day my mom called the base, and the base told her that it was some type of weather something, and my father said no, he didn't think so, and I was just curious to what you thought about that.
Weather somethings don't take off that fast.
I didn't think so. And as soon as it took off, the helicopters, everybody went their own way, and that was the end of it. But it was extremely weird.
See, I'm convinced over the last several years what people have seen, in addition to the possibility of UFOs, are drones. I think drones have been tested for 5 or 10 years, and they're starting to see them, and that kind of makes things even more confusing. Anyways, Tom, you've got a text for us. What do you got for us, Tom?
This one is from Jason in Massachusetts. Creepy show tonight, George. Tell me what really scares you.
What really scares me? Well, there are 2 kinds of fears for me. One is, fear for the people I care about, my family and my friends. That's a different kind of a scare. I don't want anything to happen to them. To me, that's scary in a different way. But another kind of scare, I'm not scared of ghosts. I'm not scared of extraterrestrials. I'm not scared of things like that. I'm scared that we're going to blow up this planet. Mankind is going to blow up this planet and do something stupid. That, I think.
That's a very legitimate fear.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But it's not the scary, creepy fear that I think people want to know.
That really doesn't creep me. I mean, today, seeing that little old lady, a face, Tom, I'm telling you, as white as those paper towels over there. And her eyes were pitch black. And she kind of like lifted her head up real slowly and just like stared at me, almost like she wanted to reach out and say hi. That was creepy.
Could she be a black-eyed children grown
that
up?
grew up, maybe. Yeah. I was thinking about that as I was speeding away.
I should call David Weatherly and ask him.
With her chasing me down the road. All right, thanks. Let's take a few more calls here. Rich is with us in New York, east of the Rockies. Richard, go ahead.
Yes, George. Nice to speak to you.
You too, sir.
I have an unusual story that pertains to what Bob Fletcher was talking about Planet X a few weeks ago.
Okay.
In 1965, I had an occasion to meet a brilliant clairvoyant named the Right Reverend Roseanne Erickson at the Ansonia Hotel in New York on 73rd Street, 79th Street on the west side. When you go into her place, you could put any 3 questions you want on a piece of paper and $3 in the basket and put your initials on it, and she would get to you. So it finally came my turn, and she points to me and she said, "You." And she said, "Your friend is going to die in a lake, and be very careful of a guy named Norman."
Oh, my.
Then she said, "You're going to get in a fight around your car, and I want you to roll up your window and keep your mouth shut," which happened almost immediately in Fort Lee after we left this clairvoyant. So we knew that for $3 you couldn't arrange a fight of a bunch of teenagers,
not that
about
fast,
500 of them, in Fort Lee for $3.
No.
So a month later, my friend's Steve's cars break down, and he wants me to take him to a lecture. So I said, fine, okay. Now this woman, the clairvoyant, had told me that something about the 2 witnesses, a Bible reference that I didn't know anything about, and that she said very shortly you're going to meet a man who's one of the most profound men in the United States in the I Am. And she said, I want you to mind your P's and Q's and pay attention because he's going to ask you who you are. So I had no idea what she was talking about. About a month later, my friend's car breaks down. We go to this lecture that he wants to go to. I say, I don't want to go in because I don't know these people. I was very shy.
Yeah.
So we argue in the car for a few minutes about I'm going in or not, and I finally reluctantly went in. And as this man is talking, I hear a very soft but powerful voice describing everything that's coming out of his mouth before it comes out of his mouth. He's talking about the waters above being divided from the waters below by a firmament, and this voice is saying that this is the Christ door, this is the Shekinah, it's a connecting link between the truth above and the truth below. And all of a sudden, the entire room turned into a brilliant white cloud, so bright white that it hurt my eyes. So he continues to talk for a while, and I can't see anybody in the room, and neither can he, as far as I found out later on. It was just the 2 of us. And we were crowded into this room. So I was very shy. When the lecture is over, I skedaddled out of there, dragging my friend Steve with me. About 2 weeks later, I get a phone call that this man wants to see me in private. So I figured anybody that could turn the room white, I'd go talk to him for a while. So I go to talk to this guy, and he starts to ask me questions out of the 38th chapter of Job. Where were you when the lines were drawn on the face of the earth? Which is essentially now. Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? That's about cycles. Canst thou unloose the bands over Orion and tie up the Sweden? And answers are coming out of my mouth I never heard in my life. And I don't know what's going on. Then he says to me, by the way, who are you? Which is exactly
Just
what
what
the
she
clairvoyant
said.
had said to me. Excuse me?
That's exactly what she pointed out.
That's exactly right. I almost fell on the floor. Anyway, this guy and I became very good friends, and he introduced me to a reel-to-reel audio tape made in 1950 in a little farmhouse in front of a fireplace, either that or in a log cabin church that might have held 15 people down a dirt road, jammed up against the Rocky Mountains. On the tape, this man is describing in excruciating detail that in the near future we will see a bright star. Star will turn into a comet, and the comet will be a planet. And the rest of it I don't want to go into because it's almost like you say, you have this fear of something terrible happening to the Earth. Well, he goes into detail about what it is. And
do we have a time limit here?
Yeah, it's around this time. It's around this time.
Oh boy, just what we need.
Almost to the exact points that Bob Fletcher was pointing out.
Well, we'll monitor it. He's not the first, but when you begin to hear it from people who are supposedly prophetic, that does get to be a little jarring. Couple more calls here, and then UFO Phil joins us. We've got John, first-time caller in Lake Villa, Illinois. Hey, John, it's your turn. Welcome to the show.
Hi, sir. How you doing?
Good.
Long-time listener of the show.
Thank you, John.
I just wanted, in fact, the gentleman I'm going to tell you about is the one who introduced me to the show back in the 90s. But a friend of mine, we were in the Navy together. We did 20 years. We retired like 2 months apart. But sadly, he had a heart attack this past Saturday.
Oh, jeez.
And my wife's actually with his wife right now in Virginia.
Did he die?
That's what's weird about this. He was pronounced brain dead 3 days ago. So his wife had to make a decision as of yesterday afternoon by 11 p.m. to, I guess, disconnect, is I guess how you call it. Well, 3 o'clock yesterday, I'm a truck driver. I'm actually working right now. 3 o'clock yesterday morning, I get a phone call on my phone, and I don't I look at the number, and it's just all zeros and unknown, so I don't answer it. Now, this happens for like 15 minutes. I get 2 more calls, same thing. Well, the final time, I actually pick up the phone and answer it, but there's nobody there. There's no nothing. There's no anything. Well, 9 o'clock yesterday morning, my wife calls me and says, hey, David passed on.
Oh, my God.
And then I was like, whoa.
David stayed with you, that's for sure. And thanks for serving, by the way. 9 years Navy for me. You doubled that and then some, to be sure. Hey, the clock's got us. We're going to do this again next week, too. And don't forget, this weekend, we've got Lee Cigar for you, and we've got Connie Willis, and we've got some great, great shows. Need to track my calendar. Don't forget, if you're in the Vancouver area in British Columbia, June 6th, major event. All that is under my events calendar at coasttocoastam.com. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, and George Knapp, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.